Hey everybody, welcome to the secret history living in your aquarium. So we have the hardscape done, and that is in a video called Hardscape Part 1. Go figure, right? I've just been letting it dry out a little bit to see how things were going to settle as far as compaction goes, but when I put water in, that will happen even more. And I've also added some tannins, so basically organic botanical elements. This is a lotus pod, and it will float, but hopefully I can anchor it down by just putting the wood on it. Now the wood might also float, and that's a whole other battle that I'm not really worried about, but we may need to attach something to the base of the wood, like a stone, or wedge it into a piece of something, or honestly just hold it down to the bottom for up to a month or two sometimes, but then it will be saturated enough that it will just stay. If you really don't like how that looks and you're working on an aquascape, you can also just put it into one of your other tanks and just let it get nice and saturated, and then it'll be full of that good bacteria. In fact, it'll actually be a decent way to help jumpstart your tank. So in this tank, you can see we've got this tower up here that's a good 8 inches or so, 7 inches higher than the rest of the substrate. And then we have a terrace, and I've actually built so much substrate that the terrace is only about 3 inches higher, which is less than I had hoped originally, but I think it's going to work out just fine still. I think even if there wasn't a terrace, it would have grown in okay, but the other thing to consider is what's kind of cool about this setup, and it is in a way a little wasteful, is that there is aqua soil. There's ADA Amazonia rather, all under this entire substrate. So I can plant in any spot I want. Now the hair grass that I want to plant, I have 3 different varieties, including one that gets tall and wispy that I want to put kind of in the back corners. And then I've got another one that is very short, the mini dwarf hair grass. You can see here we've got the Eliocharis parvula and the Eliocharis acucularis. Man, I can never say that. And then also another version of just normal hair grass. So that will be kind of the mid-range hair grass, and I want to tuck that in to the rocks in the front here. So we'll have hopefully a grassy carpet all through here. And then we're going to have Rotala macrandra, super red, which this is Rotala Hra is the actual subvariety, and we're going to plant that in the back row in a big line to kind of block out, so it's kind of a wall, essentially a wall of colorful red. Now this light's pretty intense. It should give, it's almost 6,000 lumens, so it should definitely give enough energy to carpet even at the bottom of the tank, no problem. It will likely also spark a lot of algae growth, so part of the reason I'm using the botanicals is to keep the water a little more acidic, and then the substrate itself will buffer the water. And since my water out of the tap is near neutral, near 20 or 30 TDS, and that's with the chlorine in it, so it's almost nothing. I mean, it's almost RO water out of the tap. It's all rainwater in Seattle. That should probably keep the tank around 6.5 to 7, somewhere in there, naturally. And then if I feel it necessary, I can always add more tannins. But between the wood and the leaves and lotus pod and everything, it should help bring that down. Now, then we also have a few other types of Rotala here for an accent. And I'll probably kind of do a Dutch style where there's a whole back wall and then there's other plants in front of it. I think I'm going to do Bacopa colorata that will come and grow up out of the water of the tank as part of this area, like right in this L shape. And then something substantial in the center here, like Lagunandra European or something, maybe something that would grow out really nicely, like Barclay longifolia, one of those big leafy plants that's colorful and substantial. But most of those tend to not like highlight, and so I'll probably scoot this light more forward most of the time, at least when guests aren't over, to really encourage this carpet. And then that'll still be enough light, even if it's just off center light or off to the side like this, that it'll pull the wall of Rotala forward. It'll reach towards that, which will just help it grow a little quicker rather than keeping it dense and short, because we've got such intense light, and we'll have CO2 running. Now beyond that, I'm also going to plant some crypts in choice locations. So they're going to have kind of the similar burgundy or red color, Cryptocorn spiralis tiger and red crypt spiralis. And I can show you some of that in my other tanks real quick. And then the other thing that I'm going to show you before we fill it with water and start adding plants is this is kind of the color of like the new crypts will be right here, this kind of pinkish red, burgundy red, I guess. And then here we've got the bio balls for the filter, and I've added some old bio balls from a different filter that's already cycled, and so that should help it get started. It should help cycle the tank quicker than normal and get that ammonia down to a level where it's more nitrate than ammonia. Now, even though there's a bunch of algae on it, and this is kind of the fear, you can see what a Cryptospiralis red tiger looks like. So you can see that the color that is possible there, but also this tank was started as an experiment with Marimo moss balls covering this wood, and the wood itself is just so inundated with moss now, which is actually an algae, that now it's growing on everything. So it can be quite competitive. So you kind of want to be careful when you're starting a tank. You don't want to cycle it with introducing any one algae or bladderwort or duckweed or anything that can take over, because it's going to be unopposed. And the same thing goes, I suppose, for anything that you have. If you've got like a bacterial growth or something funky on a piece of wood or whatnot, you don't really want to add that, because it's just going to be unimpeded. There's nothing that's going to slow it down, really. So let me show you a couple more plants we're going to add and what they look like when they're immersed. Right away, here's one of the bacopas, shape-wise, what it looks like, and it'll come up out of the water no problem, as will this. This is another plant that I'm thinking of using, which is a sword, an Amazon sword, that's coming up out of the water pretty well too. So I am considering, even though it has some algae on it as well, so I might just cut it back quite a bit. Working, since it's a rosette plant, you work from the outside in, and I'll probably, instead of cutting off the tips, I'll probably just whittle it down or split it if there's a good spot to split it when I pull it, when I dislodge it in there. So let's go look at a couple more of the plants that we'll be adding, and so you can get an idea of the color scheme. It'll kind of be something like this color scheme actually, but totally different plants. And then you'll also get an idea of how the rocks and things will get covered, but then we'll actually do it and you can see it in high speed. I don't think we're going to have any floating plants ideally in this tank. Want it kind of like a flooded forest or flooded field, like in Southeast Asia tank is what I think I'm going to do. I was going to do an African tank, but I think I'm going to wait until I have a larger tank to do that, just because we're really limited on the nano species from Africa at the moment, and I can get quite a few Southeast Asian, Borneo, Java, Papua New Guinea species that are quite beautiful and that would go in this 22 gallon really well. So let's take a look at the other tank real quick, and then you'll see a time lapse and a little bit of an interjection of anything that I'm doing in the process of working on this. So with these tanks, you definitely have to be patient, and you know, a lot of things, when you put a high light on them, this is the same light here, you'll actually get flowers. And so this is I pointed this out in the last video as well, but this is a Aponogeton crisp crispus, and it is just beautifully burgundy red and purple, and it might make a good corner plant too, although it grows pretty tall before it starts branching out. So I'm leaning more towards something like Lagunandra boldi. I don't want to move this because there's my pleco is sitting on it relaxing. But the Lagunandra leaves are, well, actually I will, because the Lagunandra leaf is right here. It's got that beautiful silver on it. And it's a neat plant. It stays small when the light's intense and actually gets bigger when the light's not intense. And then here's Lagunandra European Red or German Red, followed by Lagunandra carolensis, which apparently my plecos have been a little rough with. But the Lagunandra carolensis has pointier leaves, and it's just more of a plain green. Stays small like this even in high or low light. And then what I wanted to show you guys is the colorata that's in the tank, and it's a nice color in here. It's got kind of a pink hue with the green, so it's kind of a mix of that dark red curtain we're going to get in the background combined with the green too. And when you see it over here, you can see when it comes up out of the tank how it can start to get a little darker red on the leaves too. But it also flowers pretty nicely. All the bacopas are pretty nice flowering plants, and underwater they look pretty similar to how they look outside of water, which I think will be cool. And I also want to do the rotala that way. Now, I have been contemplating doing Limnophilia aromatica, but I'd rather have the hydroides or hippodroides variety than this one, because it has purple showing on the underside of the leaves in this one, whereas the other one, the leaves curl upside down and the whole plant kind of twists, and might look cooler with that. So I'm a little torn on which one to do, but we'll figure it out. And then down in there is the Rotala H-Raw, that nice blood red color, and that should really shine with the light on it like that. So any of these plants are fair game. This is a Limnophilia mini right there with the purple leaves, and then we've also got a Rotala Vietnam that's kind of very similar right next to it, as well as Mayaka, which has a red stem, and the green leaves, the red Mayaka. So we've got a lot of options of what we could take from other tanks, although I'd like to kind of start it with the plants from the existing tissue cultures in the other room, because then I'm not introducing, like I said, any sort of blackbeard algae or bladderwort or anything like that, spleen wort, stuff that just happens to get in your tanks over the years when you got a bunch of tanks, or duckweed for that matter. So then we can kind of let that settle, let the tank get up to speed with the biofiltration from the filter media that we've gotten that's used and still full of life from the other tanks. And that should really get us in a good place. So that's all the rundown info. And if you want to see me actually doing it, that's where we'll set you up on a tripod and we'll do a time lapse for you. So you guys can see me fill the tank and begin the planting. All right, let's do it to it, guys. All right, so we have the first phase of planting done, where we've got some crypts and some hair grass in, and then a little bit of Rotala H-Raw. That's about it. We also some Rotala Any. Things are not exactly situated the way they will be once everything is all established, but you can kind of see what I'm going for. So now we're going to put in more of the taller growing plants. You can see there we've got some Bangladesh Red tucked in, as well as some of those red crypts. So really I want to keep the main open sandy areas, I want to keep them as such. I want to keep them no taller than about that hair grass right there. Then we have a taller species of hair grass in the corner to kind of bring the focal point up on either side, and as well as just some interesting flares, but with continuity tied across the whole thing. in front of the Rotala atria, which is planted against the back of that terrace that we built with the, you can see the plastic when I'm above it right now, but we can tuck in leaves or we can lean rocks or anything to hide it, so it's not a big deal. And right now we've also got the lotus pod and the wood pieces all trying to sink, so we're holding them into place with some funky rocks for now. But right now we've got a bunch of other plants. You know, we've got some Ludwigia ex lacustris, we've got Monte Carlo, Tonina fulvalis, some a water sprite, as well as Rotala mini butterfly, green, yellow, and red. They're all just kind of mixed. Rotala Vietnam, Limnophilia aromatica mini, Bacopa colorata, and then Stellata dawsons, Stellata octopus dawsons, and a few other little things here and there. So we're gonna do all that, tuck all that in, with the plan of being immersed growth in that corner and maybe this corner, and anywhere along the back would be all right also. So let's get to it, and I will see you in the time lapse. Alright, so I have a whole other video on how to prepare tissue cultures, why they melt, things like that. So if you're curious on any of that information and how I prepared all these, which takes quite a bit of time actually, into little plugs that you can just pop in, definitely check out my tissue culture videos or my aquascaping playlist yet again. Full of good stuff there if you want to aquascape and you want to know every little detail about how these are made, or you know what the difference is between live plants and tissue cultures, why I'm using live Rotala versus I mean I should say they're all live, but why I'm using non-tissue cultured Rotala grown in a farm versus submerged Rotala or tissue culture Rotala. They all have different functions. Tissue culture can be immersed or submerged, and it will grow the same. So you can see here, it's kind of halfway in between both stages of life. If we take a look at the this Bangladesh Rotala here, it is kind of firm, like when it grows out of the water, and it has the shape of out of water growth, but yet the base is still very watery growth looking, and the leaves are all still rubbery. So what's nice about it is you can use them for terrariums or vivariums when you have those. Now, I don't want to leave these root systems exposed too long, so I got to hurry up, fill this tank, and get these roots and plants in the water before they dehydrate. So let's do this. Time lapse time. Alright everybody, so here we are all planted up. So now it's just a matter of filling in. I actually planted this now almost a week ago, so I've taken the time in the time lapse for things to grow a bit. But but you can see there's some algae growing, and that's totally normal with an aquascape. Definitely when you're doing this high of light, right above, like 6 inches above it, you're gonna see that. Also though, you'll see how much photosynthesis is going on. The plants are pearling like crazy. That is an active sign. It shows you that they are actually photosynthesizing so fast that you're getting little bubbles coming out of them. And also you'll see the colors have really intensified just in the short time since we planted, in a week. So these were kind of a dull bronze color, and now they're a really vivid pink. Up here, we're getting a little bit of growth already that's kind of a dingy color looking on the plants, and that's, again, algae. So what's going to happen is this tank needs to fully cycle. There's still too much ammonia, nitrites, and nitrates coming out from this tank for it to not grow life on every corner, basically, plant life, or algae, or cyanobacteria. So what we'll have to do is lots of water changes, quite a bit of manual cleaning, and then beyond that, there may be layers of like the hair grass that we need to trim and just get rid of the algae. Same with some of the taller stem plants. But it will find an equilibrium. The key is really intense light, which we've got here, and keeping that light basically on in high intensity for short periods. So 6 hours a day or 8 hours a day max. And it depends on your setup. I mean, if you have a light that's high up and it's only low to moderate light, something like this little tank, you can blast the light 12 to 15 hours a day sometimes. But with this, with the CO2 and the fertilizers and the root tabs and everything we've put in here, basically they will grow like they're on steroids. And while the plants are sleeping, so to speak, while the lights are off, it will be time for them to take their sugars and things and basically build. So they kind of have to wash out their toxins and basically all their CO2 that they have in gaseous form in themselves, they release at night, and their oxygen in the day. And so in the day, you can see all the little bubbles leaving the plants. And these taller grasses, the cypress health fry and the normal hair grass rather than the dwarf hair grass, it will probably need to be trimmed several times. But with the grasses and with a lot of this carpeting stuff, it likes to be trimmed. And already in a week, you can see I planted lines of grass, and we're starting to get runners that are just sticking up random places now. So that's a really good sign, actually. I wasn't sure with the sand if it would run through it okay, but I think because the roots are already reaching all the way, look, this root's already grown all the way down to here. It shows you that a deep substrate really does help in that it can grow down and you can get a much denser mat of carpet when you've got a deep substrate of aqua soil underneath. Now, the wood I've weighed down with some stones, so the stones and things aren't exactly like I want them, and I know anything that I put up there is just going to get cooked. And I want these plants to grow immersed, so I'm letting them get to the surface and grow immersed. But the other plants that I want to put in there, and there's a stick in the way kind of, but the other plants that I want to go in there, something big and impressive like a Lagunandra or a fern or something, that's just going to get cooked by that light. So it's got to be a high light plant, or it's got to be tucked behind the light. The light has to come forward, in which case all those plants will reach for the light and come forward. But I kind of allowed for that in that there's still a row of soil in front here, and the plants are already reaching forward for the light. They'll do that. They'll reach for the light. Now, one other thing that I tell people not to worry about is when they see this slimy, foggy coating on their wood, see it down here? That is completely normal. That's tannins coming out of the wood and a wood rot or fungi breaking it down, as well as bacteria breaking it down. And that's actually just like cellulose that's in a matrix of protoplasm, or basically cell goo. And if you have fish in here, once you're able to have fish and the ammonia's dropped a little bit, usually after 2 weeks or so, with aqua soil that has ammonia in it, then they'll clean that up. So what I'll probably do is put a whole bunch of shrimp in here and some Siamese algae eaters at very first. And you can see I've actually got some tester shrimp in here to see how the ammonia is doing. I'm not sensing ammonia on the test kit anymore. It was literally forest green on the API test tubes at first, but now it's just kind of slightly off the normal color, almost like 0.5, 0.25 ammonia probably. And you can see though that it is growing on the rocks and stuff. So I'll have to scrub those a little bit, probably with a toothbrush, when the time comes to battle that. But it's good to kind of nip it in the bud. And the last thing I'll tell you guys, because this is already a long video, is that you want to take any detritus or basically dead matter, any fish poop, anything like that that's in here and noticeable early on, any leaves that are melting and falling off plants, you want to take those and get rid of them. So you need to get that biological material out of there, because it's just going to turn into more ammonia nitrates and carbon and nitrogen, basically in different forms, that all are going to build up and cause more algae. So cleaning your tank and doing water changes is pretty important in this phase to keep the algae down. But even when you do all that, especially with such a low tank, you're going to get algae. And that's just par for the course. Oh, the last thing I forgot to tell you is I put this little guy in here, just a baby ancestris, and he's eating that white gooey stuff. So they love that. I mean, that's what they eat in the wild too. So it's full of fiber, and Mikey likes it. Let's just put it that way. So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in. Let me know what you think, if there's any tweaks. Obviously, this rock's going to come out of there. It's just holding the wood down until it's finished becoming waterlogged. Same with the lotus pods kind of wedged in there with the filter. Oh, and we put a pre-filter on the hang off the back. And that's just to give it more biofiltration. The other thing I like to do sometimes is hide the CO2 diffuser, just so more bubbles collect and get kind of knocked around. You don't want to block the path completely, but you can knock them around and break them up into smaller pieces by letting them hit the cord and the leaf. And on the way up, sometimes they'll even make a little foam at the top. And that's usually a pretty good indication that you have ammonia still. If you're getting a foam, that, or there is particulate like sand, dust, or aqua soil debris. So I'm going to leave you guys here, and if you have any questions about what plants are in here, we kind of went over it, but if you have any questions, feel free to leave them below. And if you have any questions about that algae, what to do, and other questions about aquascaping, substrates, what kind of substrates there are, which one's right for you, what stones to use, what wood to use, all that is in my aquascaping playlist. So thanks for joining. Please hit that like button if you did like this. It does help it travel, and leaving a comment also does. So really appreciate that. And if you want more tips or one-on-one help, you can always become a member, and I'm always around to answer questions. So have a good one, guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye.